Rogue and Druid along the way. It's looking good for Surrender, but even then, he's gone for some slightly different inclusions this week with the Malagos Druid, when he's traditionally much more favored the survival version.
It's true. Malagos Druid, I'm actually surprised to see it prop up a bit more in popularity in GM for this week, because I understood it as a good choice for the Specialist week when you were expecting to see a lot more priests, but I've always felt like the Survival Druid has a bit more balance of a matchup spread, which lends itself to closer to being the 4 best decks inclusion if you're going for that type of strategy, but maybe Surrender is trying to soft target something with this type of turbo type.
Maybe. But now with the Tempo Mage Mirror to start things off, a very explosive mirror for sure. An interesting mulligan already for our competitors. Tom, being on the coin, obviously had more options, and I think the standard mulligan was what he went for here, of just going for Primordial Studies. But with an Evocation in hand, I was already getting tempted to just hold on to Evocation and mulligan everything else looking for the Apprentice.
Well, I definitely like keeping Evocation when you have Apprentice, but I do like the choice from Tom. What I'm surprised by, if my eyes didn't deceive me, is Surrender keeping Shenvala on its own on the plate, which actually, if you're on the plate, that makes more sense to me as a keep, because it, just as a 3-mana 2/5 body, can sometimes be problematic for the other mage to deal with, but it kind of requires that you hit a 1-drop to support it, otherwise you can fall behind by the time you play it, like this turn.
Yeah, it was kind of a rough spot for Surrender, because it had to be almost exactly this curve for it to be killable on board. You know, it's possible that if he just played the 1-drop, then it could have been double Ray of Frost, coin, hero power. Like, there are obviously always ways it can die, but this is the way it's guaranteed to die. Even having said that, though, I really wouldn't be too surprised to see Surrender just throw it down on board here.
Right, I think he still just plays it. Oh, well, with the 0-mana Evocation due to his Incanter's flow, this does give some alternative options.
Okay. I mean, you got to remember, even if you only get one good spell out of it, it's still a decent removal spell, and finding Arcane Breath here is premium.
Just a question of whether he wants to pair it with Second Flow or the Learn Draconic. I'm definitely on board with the Learn Draconic, because you hardly have any spells that cost more than 1 in the deck. Just a Cram Session, I believe.
Yeah.
Nice Brain Freeze here. And yeah, with the Mana Giant in hand, it really lets you know what's up in Surrender's game plan. He wants to get these discounts turboed out.
That was just so sick. Like, I mean, I was definitely, I was going to say tunnel visioning on Shenvala, because it was the kept play. But it was just such a clean recognition. He was reasonably likely to get enough spells to play Mana Giant on the following turn, and he got exactly that.
And he's rewarded being able to put down the 8/8, but Tom, with his own Tempo Shenvala, has a reasonably likely shot of punishing, or not to say punishing, but getting the activation on a 5/5. If Surrender's Giant remains unfrozen, I think it's still fine.
I wonder.
Surrender is running the list without Conjurer's Calling. Instead, as we saw, going for the Cobalt Spellkin package. So going for the Giant here is, you know, it's not disastrous if it gets cleared off. As long as he's taking out some minions alongside it, it's just a way to keep up on board.
Right. Starts off with the Primordial Studies. If he hit, you know, like a 1-cost minion, you could still play the Mana Giant. The discount doesn't really matter by that point.
What to do? What to do?
It was just a matter of whether he wanted to hold on to that 0-cost spell to pair with Shenvala, but it doesn't look like the Shenvala is likely to get active anytime soon.
Yeah, he's probably holding on for post Cobalt Spellkin, at which point he's reasonably likely to have found another 1-mana spell anyway. So I like just playing for max tempo here.
Well, this turn could be huge for Tom. One Thief to get something cheap, or even the Mana Cyclone. Oh, the Brain Freeze is backbreaking.
Such a big deal here. Another spell for Cyclone, a way to freeze the Giant. Again, no Conjurer's Callings in the list, so there's not even a particularly strong punish here.
Yeah, this was the nightmare for Surrender. Everything that Tom could ask for: board development, an answer to the Giant, and a Shenvala activation. If Surrender's gonna come back, I feel like it has to involve a Raz top deck.
That would definitely help to ameliorate things. Again, there are ways to generate Conjurer's Calling, which could help here in order to get value from the Giant, but it really has to be this turn or it's just going to be dead, so it's kind of a pipe dream here.
Arcane Breath costing 0 means that he can fish for Frost Nova.
Frost Nova Combustion is also a big deal. You need to kind of imagine how that would work out. Unfortunately, the positioning's pretty good against Combustion here.
But you can see already from the targeting by Surrender that he is hoping for something better than just single target Apprentice and call it a turn. Didn't hit it, but I can respect the optimism.
He's missed everything. He just needed any kind of spell there. They're all cheaper as well because of the Incantus Flow that he played at the start of the game. He needed Arcane Explosion, Arcane Missiles, Combustion, Frost Nova, any way to try and clear some of this up. But he did not find it.
Pretty funny that the discounts actually put him farther away from completing the Learn Draconic too.
True.
This is a devastating Arcane Explosion. But going for a freeze instead means that Surrender doesn't get the missiles in hand. I actually really dig this play from Tom.
Yeah. It's a weird way to go about it, but I guess he's just saying he's dealing so much damage, the 2-turn lethal is just here. Doesn't need to give the missiles at all.
I like it. And he still gets rid of the Giant because generated Conch is the way he loses, like you said. And also gets rid of the spell damage minion because Raz top deck is still a small fear.
Okay, that's a draw. That's something that can dig Surrender out of this one. Again, Frost Nova looking pretty mandatory here.
I can't think of a minion that costs 3 or less that digs him out.
Yeah, Wand Thief is just that little bit too expensive. Mana Cyclone doesn't do it.
Take the head from Surrender. So if you hit Wand Thief off of Bond of Power, you can still get double Ray of Frost to stay alive on board.
Okay. Yeah, well, whatever it was that he got there, it wasn't game-winning. Even Apprentice off the top, no spells to go along with it. I think it's unfortunate for Surrender. It was a well-played game going for the innovative use of Evocation there, instead of just going for the standard expected play of Shenvala. But at the end of the day, Surrender just kind of played the ABCs of Tempo Mage there. Mulligan for the powerful cards, found them, and won because of it.
Yeah, for Tom, I just really like that small optimization at the end of not even giving Surrender the Arcane Missiles, because if Surrender had managed to generate spell damage minions alongside that, there was a small chance that Tom falls behind, and also it would have activated Surrender's Learn Draconic side quest. So maybe there's a small world where Rays of Frost and spell damage minion actually pull Surrender out of that one. So very cool on both sides.
Very cool. And definitely one that a mirror that I hope we get to see much more of. Just love seeing Tempo Mage of any kind. You always get to see different lines that people will explore, the different artistry that comes in with the deck. And we will be getting to see it from Surrender again, hopefully, at some point if he wants to turn this one around. Before we can see that, though, we are going to go to a short break here in the middle of this series. Surrender versus Tom will continue after this. You're watching Surrender up against Tom in our first match of the day here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. It's the second week of round robin here, so we're still getting to know a little bit more about how the players will be faring. This is the portion where players vie for either qualification through to playoffs to play in our final week. One player out of those players in playoffs will go to the World Championship to join Glory as our representative from Season 1. And some of the other players who are faring less well are, of course, vying for their lives in Grandmasters. Still early days for all of our players, even if they are not at a particularly good score. Still plenty of time to pull a win together and start wrestling their way up. But Surrender is looking in prime position to be once again, Gia, fighting for that spot in qualification through to the World Championships, even if he is 0-1 against Tom right now.
That's right. 3-0 overall in match score, probably one of the most consistent performers, if not the most consistent player in APAC. And he has got himself a pretty good matchup to follow up to that first game loss at the very least. He has his Malagos Druid now lining up against Tom's Bomb Warrior, which is the notable archetype that Surrender has left out of his own lineup, which you can only assume means that he's fine facing up against it.
Yes, yeah, I think you can definitely make that assumption. The Malagos Druid here is definitely one that I'm still on the fence about. Like, I'm more favorable towards the Survival Druid than some players have been seeing. I've seen somewhat tongue-in-cheek remarks about how Druid is a tier 3 deck at the moment. Some people, I'm sure, very possibly believe that. But I do still think, even if it's somewhat inconsistent as to whether or not you find the ramp in the early game, still an extremely powerful deck. The Malagos Druid, on the other side, though, is definitely a bit more finicky in its win condition. You can't just play cards and hope to get the win most of the time.
That's right. Surrender is one of the players who has been kind of championing Survival Druid in the early weeks of GM, just bringing it even though Druid was hardly a popular archetype in the early weeks. He moved away from it for Specialist, which is understandable, but now that we're back on Conquest, the decision to go for Malagos over Survival Druid, I suppose, loses him a couple percentage points in this particular matchup. But I still think that because you run the slightly thinned out Guardian Animals package, still lends you a mid game, and then you can close out with big dragons instead, and you have a bit of spell damage to go over the top, especially Tom's version of Bomb Warrior not having the risky skipper patented ways of gaining HP.
Indeed. And speaking of big dragons, the mulligan there for Surrender made some amount of sense with Breath of Dreams and Alexstrasza. Absolutely, you keep those to get the guaranteed ramp. The interesting bit was holding on to Twilight Runner and throwing away Lightning Bloom. Surrender was one of the players that you were interviewing for Mullet Over, I believe, asking about the benefits of holding on to or throwing away Innovate and Lightning Bloom.
Yeah, that is definitely a case-to-case thing the more that we see it. What interests me more is holding on to the Twilight Runner when you would much rather pull it out with the Guardian Animals. It could be that Surrender is thinking if you're able to turbo out that beast, then he can get the guaranteed card draw. Surrender's particular list only runs one overflow, so I think that card draw and prioritizing that where you can get it would be a higher priority compared to previous lists. I think the toss on Lightning Bloom is fine as well, because if you have Breath of Dreams coin, then you can still get down the Twilight Runner on this turn. And he didn't have a dragon that he wanted to turbo out. I feel like your Alexstrasza timing is saved a little bit more for when you have Malagos Burst to follow up, as opposed to, say, if you had Ysera.
And so Surrender having a really good old long thought there, because there was obviously the opportunity to just play Guardian Animals on that previous turn, or even coin out Teacher's Pet instead of the Twilight Runner there. Because the obvious thing here is Warrior has an answer to Stealth Minions in exactly Bladestorm. And so I think what Surrender is saying here is whether he goes for Guardian Animals or the Twilight Runner on that previous turn, either way, the Twilight Runner can die to a Bladestorm, but this way, the other beast that's pulled out, the Teacher's Pet, gets to survive at full health. So I really like this sequencing from Surrender.
Yes, I do agree on that. It does make his next turn a little bit awkward, but as long as he's able to get the cycle down, that's what matters. And more shots at Overgrowth would make his curve very, very easy from here on out.
And I'm not quite sure if this is correct to call it Tempo Barov, but it's an unactivated Barov at the very least here for tom60229, which is kind of good for Surrender because obviously he gets the card draw. But still, I think a nice play from Tom just to proactively get it down and sweep up next turn.
Right. Also means that if Surrender wants to leave it up to get additional damage, then Tom has initiative on,
True.
you know, getting more damage if Surrender plays any other minions down this turn. And if Surrender wants to make sure that any other minion he plays post Barov is undamaged, then he has to do the trade for Tom. Because this list from Surrendered is not running any health buff effects, no room for Iron Bark.
Hmm.
Time waits for no one.
I wonder what he's thinking of here, because I guess planning out your next turns, you know, you need to consider is Bloom Alexstrasza or even Bloom Malagos potentially what you're looking at to do on the following turn. It can't be worth using the Lightning Bloom here, I don't think. It's just whether or not he wants to pack in, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that was the question. Because Surrender was not going to play a minion this turn anyway, he's saying, Tom can do the trade for me, I'll take my 4 extra damage here, and every chunk of damage matters in a matchup where you're playing Malagos to potentially close out the game before Tom is even thinking about having lethal.
Very true, especially getting rid of that armor. Alexstrasza should be able to make quick work of all the health. Gyrocopter's an interesting idea here. You can just trade in and almost certainly take out any beast that comes off, unless it's exactly King Muckler here, in which case you just have to trade in. No value trade for you, Tom.
Yep, a wry smile from Tom there. King Mukla and I suppose the Emperor Cobra are the nightmares here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what Bloated Python as well technically is just a straight trade, but yeah, there were very few outcomes there that you don't get a value trade on. It's very miserable that he has to make that play.
I bring life.
And this is huge for Surrender, getting down an empty board Alexstrasza. He does have Malagos in hand. It's not an immediate follow-up because of the overload, but with no armor and already having seen a Blade Storm, I think it's great timing for Surrender. Tom, however, thankfully for him, has an answer.
Yeah, turn before the Deathwing as well. Just all the boxes ticked there for Surrender in terms of when to get the threat down. And now it's about trying to follow up, because he's done a lot of the work already. You know, he's ramped up, he's got the Mali in hand, he's got himself the Germination as well. So it's just about drawing through at this point. And to do that, Geppetto is a premium card to find for next turn.
Yeah, note that Surrender has drawn 2 natural beasts and pulled the other pair out from the Guardian Animals. So the minion package that's left is very limited. I think with Ghidra in hand and 2 dragons drawn, he's guaranteed to get Omu and Ysera Unleashed off of the Geppetto, which are premium results.
Is that right? Wow, there's like no other minions in the deck at all. That's insane.
Yeah. And getting that Omu for mega cheap with Malagos in hand, that has gotta be the play.
Correct ordering as well, just in case Surrender was considering trading in the Zixor here. You do not want a 1-mana 1/1 Zixor Prime, although that would be busted to include in your deck. Not at this point in the game, I don't think.
Yeah, Tom knows he's in trouble. Had no time to set up any bombs into the deck, so he can't even just like swing and hope that they all come off the top here. It's just a matter of hoping that Surrender did either does not have Malagos in hand or did not hit it off of the Geppetto, which is probably got to be unlikely by this point.
And I'm pretty sure this is just straight up 25 burst damage on this turn, because he's got Malagos, Omu,
Germination.
Yeah, I guess you can't actually do it quite in that way.
I mean,
there just has to
I think Malagos, Omu, then you Moonfire to activate, and you go Germination.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Swipe. Let me count that up again. So plus 14.
21. Yeah, it's lethal.
Yeah.
It's crazy lethal.
Just counting it up once, twice. I mean, it feels awkward to optimize because you don't get the double Malagos off of Moonfire, but it's fine.
It is fine. 6 here, 14 on the swipe, 1 with the hero power. You don't even need it as well. And that is just going to be game 2, going to Surrender. Super clean draw. The only really tough decisions for him were, of course, the mulligan and that sequencing with the beasts in the mid-game, which I think was a minor optimization, but definitely one that allowed him to get those little bit more of attacks in. Start proactively getting the chip damage in and make sure that no armor was gained. Alexstrasza does everything it needs to do, and as I mean, what do you even say about Surrender at this point? It was just a clean game. There's no further analysis I can give them that.
I mean, the only funny thing I want to note is that that's probably one of the fringe situations where you're happy to have drawn 2 beasts if you don't hit the other GA, just to make sure that you pull out the premium results with the Geppetto Joy Buzz. And it's worth noting in the first place that if you're running Malagos Druid, that card is not an auto-include.
Yeah.
I think it's more common to see the double overflow list, but Surrender has very deliberately run Geppetto and 1 overflow and the slightly streamlined beast package to give himself that type of high roll potential.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a big fan of Geppetto ever since the most recent iteration of Malagos Druid rolled around. I haven't played like the most recent variant or the most recent, played it for a while. I've mainly been going for the Survival Druid in recent weeks. But I do just think, even if it's a slow card in some of the matchups, it's kind of similar to me to Mind Render Alucia. Some of the time it's bad, but a small percentage of the games, it just instantly wins you the matchup. And I will take those chances just to have an auto win against some of the decks. And Surrender does get that pretty clean auto win there. The Warrior struggling so far for Tom, as we are seeing in a lot of the different series here. Warrior being soft targeted, I think it's fair to say, by Surrender here with the Mali Druid, and also the Weapon Rogue, which is still yet to come. Another fantastic matchup against the Warrior.
Yeah, I feel like this Warrior, if it were to take a win, has its best shot against the Mage and even the Demon Hunter from Surrender. So again, I'm unsure about Tom's ban strategy, but this is not the type of Conquest meta unless you're Chonsu, where it's a whole lineup targeting one specific deck. A lot of the matchups are hovering around the 50% marks, and a lot of the time you bring decks that are not targeting all the same thing, and you just rely on the edge you can get from the skill of playing it. So the ban decisions are very subjective, I'd say.
Very, very subjective. But I do like, again, that we're seeing this kind of leaning towards soft targeting a certain archetype. I definitely feel like at the moment that's the way to go. I'm still not swayed on Chonsu's strategy to go for the hard target, because we saw yesterday against Surrender how bad it can go. We'll have to see against Tyler whether his strategy can work out today. But for now, Surrender trying to get that 4th victory in a row. Tempo Mage, this time, I think he got an even matchup, of course, with the Mirror last time. Got himself a bad one now, though, and a pretty bad hand to be facing down from his opponent, too.
And for Tom, the keep of 2, I would say, mediocre 3-cost cards just to ensure the curve is pretty interesting to me, especially since he's running these Cult Neophytes. He got that off of the post-mulligan hand.
Right.
Eldrazi Warblades, I feel like you would rather have a bit later on when you can pair it with Twin Slices for more healing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Tom's thinking here was, I think, mostly correctly, that this matchup isn't so much about playing defensively for healing on Tom's side. It's just about locking down those early boards. Like, stopping the chip damage will heal you for more in the long run instead. And it was just whether or not you want Warblades or Soul Shear there. And against most of the minions in the early game, Warblades plus Hero Power should be able to take out pretty much everything.
Runs out on me.
That's fair. Lilith from Tom also notably runs 1 Consume Magic and the double Cult Neophytes in the place of Mana Feeder Pantheras. So the card draw is a little bit, shored up rather by the Spectral Sights that I see in here as well.
Love the Fireball pick from Surrender. It's obviously pretty poor as a removal spell, but that does, I think, that is, I think, how it's going to line up in this game. When a Lapidary comes down, or even just a Glaive-bound Adept, you just snipe it off straight away, unless we see a very aggressive turn come here for Surrender.
Yeah, actually, Tom's list is not running Glaive-bound Adept.
Oh, right,
it still has Magtheridon and the Volpera Scoundrels, which I feel have fallen out of fashion a bit recently. I'd say this is a more defensive version of the list, or at least more value-oriented, which, you know, has its upsides, because one of the exploitable weaknesses of Demon Hunter is that it doesn't have much generation usually. So if you are completely aware of how much damage the Demon Hunters have left in deck, there are situations where you can just outlast the entire 30 cards.
I wonder.
It's a really weird list. He's cut Pantheras, he's cut Wand Makers. Instead, he's got the, like you said, obviously the Volpera Scoundrels, but also Cult Neophytes, Spectral Sights, which are pretty uncommon, Consume Magic, not necessarily a core card. Very unique build of the deck.
Well, one thing about turboing out your card draw is that it helps you hit the damaging cards a lot more consistently with the Marrow Slicer if you get that online turn after turn. That is one thing that Mage doesn't have a great answer to, but the draw that Tom has had so far has been rather slow.
It has. He was kind of playing to that, of course, with his starting hand. Like, it wasn't a high damage hand at all with Volpera and Aldraki Warblades. But like you said, that's the stint that his deck leans towards.
I am master of magics.
Well, it remains to be seen whether or not I like this build. We've seen Demon Hunters go in the opposite direction with double Kenflinger and Altruist, like what Alutamu was running, which, you know, if you view the Demon Hunter deck as primarily a go face and kill them deck, that makes sense to me. But it could be that Tom is trying to lean more into the control aspect of his deck.
To be fair, Volpera coming in pretty clutch here. I wasn't really anticipating it come down, to be perfectly honest. I was looking a little more closely at just killing off the Dalaran Mage with Aldraki plus Twin Slice. Looked fairly clean to set up, or maybe even just ignore it and set up for a Blade Dance to kill it off next turn. Could, I suppose, be what he's thinking here.
A simple spell.
I was looking at the equip as well to set up Blade Dance. It always feels good to have the mana spent preemptively on the weapon, but okay, this draw for Tom makes things relatively simple, I would say.
Looks like he's just going for the Blade Dance now, though. Yeah, so this was pretty cool, right? So we were talking about setting up the Blade Dance with Aldraki. Tom was still setting up the Blade Dance with this play. He was just going about it in a way that gets minions in play as well, so he kind of nets himself more damage with this line. It's pretty interesting how it worked out.
Not more damage, but now he has 3 weapons in hand, which I feel is very awkward. I kind of like the idea of that turn equipping Marrow Slicer. I don't think you mind leaving up 4 damage on the other side of the board, which you still set up a Blade Dance for on the following turn. But surrender now. Khadgar and Tinnitus?
We have many secrets.
And he takes the one I didn't mention because the other 2 are far too greedy for the matchup.
I'm 99.9% sure Surrender did not mean to just play that card.
Yeah. This was a Cyclone turn. Was that just a straight up misclick?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, that was just a straight up misclick there from Surrender.
Well, yikes. He does get a free counter spell because of the Kirin, but that means that these Cyclones are going to be much less impactful in hand.
I'm sorry if I'm doubting your god tier play here, Surrender. It takes a lot to make me doubt the lines that Surrender's taking, but that'll do it, I think, on this occasion.
I mean, I definitely agree with you. You can see from his expression during and after the turn that he did not mean to click on the Kirin Mage, and it means that he's running out of resources now.
Well, you know what they say about South Korean video game players. Terrible mechanical skills, low APM. It's just the same in Hearthstone as every other esport.
Oh my god. You can only get away with saying this in the English stream.
It's funny because it's not true, okay, for anyone listening. That's the joke. Alright, decent draw. The card draw keeps rolling here for Surrender. He can try and juice up these mana Cyclones again, because obviously Tom here, as we were saying, with the way his deck is built and kind of with the way he's playing it, hasn't been playing super aggressive. Very little board development, very little for Surrender to be afraid of right now. So he can take it that little bit slower, even with that unfortunate misstep along the way.
Surrender going for the ping here to activate his elemental allies, I have to assume, on the next turn with the second Cyclone. That's one way of generating spells with Cyclones, but not the ideal.
Alas, poor warlock.
Ooh, missing the discount on Militia is pretty unfortunate for Tom. Still has 3 soul fragments in the deck though, so it's a decent play on the next turn, especially since he can play Spirit Jailer now, juice it up.
Yeah, it's one of those things we hear talked about a lot on the Europe stream, is when to throw in your soul fragments into the deck, because there's, when it costs 0 mana, obviously some consideration for just holding it till next turn. But I think you take the 1/3 on board for the average of potentially drawing 1 more soul fragment in.
Yep. I would agree. Well, big draw for Surrender.
Huge.
That of completing the quest alongside Conjurer's Calling. We could very well see minions that are not of the size that Militia can clear.
Whoa!
Turalion
Rush and then...
actually buffs the 1-3.
Oh yeah, that's true. Rush your Turalion. Conjurer's calling it again, I reckon. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Look good. Oh, okay,
Oh, no.
Those are some big boys.
An A8 and a 0-12. That's a disaster.
Complete disaster. No way Surrender wins from here. Because it's not true, right?
Exactly. Now you're getting it. Huge turn,
Well,
obviously.
He did end up drawing the Soul Fragment, so it's just 4 3/3s here.
Yeah.
Can't get rid of both of the giants.
No Blade Dance to clear things up as well, even if he had enough attack on his weapon.
He can silence the 0-12.
Ah.
Surrender's still stressed by his misclick, even though he's this far ahead. I mean, we keep talking about how in this matchup, the way the mage wins is by turboing out the giants. And the way the Demon Hunter wins is by swinging a lot of damage to their face. But Surrender managed to get down the giants before Tom was even very aggressively swinging face.
To be fair though, Gia, if I'd made one mistake in 2 years of top-level competitive Hearthstone, I'd be pretty embarrassed as well. It's kind of cringe, I gotta say.
Okay, I would be interested in seeing Tom potentially try to set up just... I wonder if there's a way to get away trading everything but the big boys and you maintain all of your 3/3s. Technically, they can only send 16 face. And then you have Marrow Slicer, Twin Slice for the follow-up.
Fair.
Probably risky.
Yeah, I mean, was there lethal on board there? Because if not, there could have been the line of just ignoring pretty much everything and just going face and trying to pray for the top decks. I guess there's pretty slim stuff, like would have been exactly Soul Shard Lapidary.
Yeah, and it would have to assume Surrender didn't have any freeze effect. Plus, he could just trade away the majority of Tom's damage.
Yeah.
Tough both ways. EGH every time. I don't think this is worth mind gaming.
Oh, I mean, we saw the god tier play yesterday with Lurker below. This is a victory lap here for Surrender. He's just reminiscing about how clever he was yesterday. is he like?
He's so stressed.
He doesn't trust himself anymore. He made a mistake. Oh, no. He's never experienced this feeling before, Gia. This is new territory for Surrender. An actual misplay. Up is down. Down is up.
But he still finishes his turn. I don't know, Derek. It's gonna be another 2 years before we ever see Surrender make a mistake on stream.
Like
I don't know if we're supposed to treasure this moment or just pretend it never happened. Well, you can kill the giant. Double Shard Shatter, Chaos Strike.
Or he can ignore the giant. Like, I guess you probably you're fighting forward a little.
Yeah, he's just not setting up lethal is the thing.
Yeah.
So you can't justify going face. But he is thinking about going face because you never ever hit the 12-1.
Sure. Alright, getting very close to lethal here. Fireball straight up ends the game on this turn here.
Ooh,
Conjurer's Calling, though, on the 12-1. Yep. I'm just...
That's a dream.
Mirror Image is tempting here, right? That's the only reason that you don't snap pick Conjurer's Calling, because he does have ways to develop pressure outside of the conj.
I think at 17, with Tom just having the 2-1 weapon and 3 cards, it's unreasonable to assume that Surrender dies. So I think what he's actually more afraid of is Tom healing out of range of lethal over 2 turns. So I like developing more damage on board. Wait, lethal!
Just lethal! Yeah, he gets the 2 3/3s here. Once again, Surrender has made one mistake in his GM career, so he's completely lost all trust in himself here, but he will realize this ends the game.
Yes, but mana utilization, so you always magic trick first there, right, Surrender?
Trust yourself,
Okay.
Surrender. You've won the game.
Yes. It is so crazy to see how much hesitation happened off of that one misclick.
That was so interesting to see. I've never seen that from Surrender. Like, he's sometimes kind of slow because he thinks out all the options, but he's always sure of himself. He always trusts himself to know what to do. Whereas here, it felt like he forgot what cards do. Like, he was sitting there with Jandis. It looked like he forgot, you know, which one do I click? Does it make the illusion one or make the real one? How do these 3/3s work? He's never been here before, Gia.
And the fireball at the end, it was kind of like, does a misclick affect
Right.
your trust in yourself being able to do math? I'm not sure. But for Surrender, this is absolutely new territory because we hold him in the highest regard. Who knows if the misclick was even his fault necessarily? I mean, sometimes there are like visual bugs that happen with the hand. I mean, in one way or another, it's a small mechanical error. I just hope that it does not carry over to the next game because I don't want to see Surrender thinking about, do I play my questing adventure to start the turn? Something like that.
Yeah, I think after he's composed himself here, it'll be back to the Surrender that we know and most certainly love here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. He has now taken the win with both the both the Mage and the Druid, leaving only the Rogue left behind. The Weapon Rogue, an archetype that while I was kind of down on recently, I think because of its space in the metagame, the little niche that it's carved out for itself is a really good bring at the moment. It's obviously mainly very, very strong against Warrior is the reason that you're bringing it. But even just against a lot of the kind of mid-rangey tempo decks, Mage, Secret Rogue, even Demon Hunter, you can just play super aggressive and hope that you get there before their power cards kick in, and often it works.
It's true. A timely Steel Dancer sometimes can sneak before they're able to set up a good Blade Dance as well. And so Surrender can win off of board and just attack also with the Self-Sharpening Sword to try and outpace the healing that Tom put together. But Tom going first here is a big deal, especially since he has Spirit Jailer to start off of. For Surrender's hand, I'm liking Spy Mistress as a keep. Everything else I'm unsure of.
Yeah, like, if it was against a more regular Demon Hunter, I think I'd consider holding Backstab because you're looking at then Pantharas, you're looking at Battle Fiends a lot of the time as well. To be fair, there are Cult Neophyte and Vulpera Scoundrel, but I think you'd rather go Spy Mistress and then probably Sneaky Delinquent to just curve, and then try and find Self-Sharpening Sword or Greyheart Sage.
The Delinquent I found, unsure because I don't feel like the ideal curve for Weapon Rogue on coin is 1-2. I would think that they want to go 1 coin 3 into 3 as the best one, and those 3s are either Greyheart Sage or Self-Sharpening Sword. But now he's hit that option.
That classic debate in Hearthstone of, is good enough good enough? Do you settle or do you go for the absolute dream highest win rate cards in the matchup? And Surrender here, I think after much deliberation, says it's just about good enough. You know, how bad can it be, even if it's not strictly optimal?
A cruel fate awaits.
Well, I'm going to start off with the card draw here and send this Spy Mistress straight to the face because even though you technically expose a 3-1 to hero power, if Tom spends 1 mana and 3 health to get rid of that, that's a win for Surrender.
Yeah, it's a list that's kind of loaded up on the 3-cost slot here, so it shuts out Vulpera, it makes Eldraki Warblades a little bit more awkward as well. A nice play.
Tom's list is not running any weapon removal either. Surrender's own Demon Hunter has 1 Acidic Swamp Ooze, but Tom does not have a way of dealing with Self-Sharpening Sword on curve.
He doesn't have a way to deal with it, but is it still better than just going double development here? Like, Worgen plus Sneaky Delinquent, while there are undeniably quite a few answers in the deck, if it connects is a huge deal.
A good point you bring up, and I hardly ever turn down Triple S on 3, but for Surrender's specific hand where he doesn't have payoff for the Self-Sharpening Sword in any way, shape, or form, no Vulpera, no Deadly Poison Steel Dancer, or Cutting Class, this does justify, in my opinion, going for this curve into even Lillian, possibly.
Now is where things get really juicy, though. There's two real plays on this turn, Gia. Is Tom brave here? Do you go for it?
And I was so tempted, I have to admit. But the fact that Surrender is tap in the list probably is enough of a deterrent on the Magtheridon and just give himself a lot of face damage save.
It was real tempting, I'll say that for sure. Surrender, though, keeping on this line of minion development, even with 8 swings he needs to get through, at least, even ignoring any durability buffs in the deck, he still is just carrying on with this approach of going minion, minion, minion. And it finally works out. No removal here allows him to connect 4 to the face.
Pretty rough for Tom that he didn't have any soul fragments left for that lapidary to even activate. I was going to say, if that were active, Tom had a very real chance of trying to race Surrender because he has waited long to get these self-sharpening swords on board. But now, I think it is time to go for the triple S and Spectral Delinquent. Only question is whether he wants to send everything face. I think you're fine with taking the hit on the lapidary here, and you take the 4-2 Death Rattle to face.
Yeah, you obviously need to think about what happens if the removal is there from hand. If it's Blade Dance or Shard Shatter Mystic, both ways the lapidary gets to stick in place. If it's the lapidary, obviously, however, you have a very clean clear with Eviscerate on the following turn. So I do think you can just get away with sending this all to the dome. And to be fair, it's clearly demonstrated that there are no soul fragments in the deck as well.
Sure. And if it is just going to be sent to the dome, then I think the Deadly Poison on this makes much more sense than the Spectral Delinquent, because you expect the Delinquent to get no more than 1 hit to the face, which is 3 damage, whereas Deadly Poison for 4 charges is plus 8 damage over the course of 4 turns.
Big draw there, I guess, for Tom. And clearly here with this line of playing minion first, incentivizing the Lillian to not go face here. Blur on this turn?
Okay.
Wow.
Just for the 1 and 3 to save 4 on your face? I mean, all the other cards were extremely slow. For once, that was actually a good Lillian.
Can it even attack your face then? Does that guarantee it doesn't if you're immune?
Don't know, honestly.
I'm not certain on that one. Secret Passage here, as I've said a couple times before, turn 6 for me is the turn to go for it. You're hitting Jandis, you're hitting Krastenov, even here, Steel Dancer, double Cutting Class. This is insane.
That does not seem legal.
Oh!
Only question is where Surrender wants to send this swing. I have to imagine face because it feels bad to overkill the 5-1, but there's a small consideration for, you know, it being definitely able to trade off Steel Dancer.
That's fair.
Blood and
Oh my lord.
Oh my gosh, even the Krasanov.
Yeah.
Steel Dancer.
Choose soon.
Is so much development this turn. Although, notably, this is going into turn 7. So Magtheridon's second Shard Shatter is a small worry.
There's no soul fragments in the deck, though. It would have to be 0 mana Spirit Jailer.
2 soul fragments now.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, of course, from the
I
Soul
do have
Shield.
Deck Tracker, and Derek doesn't, so I have omniscient powers.
We'll just go with the line that I'm dumb. That's more, I think, believable.
Nope, I definitely wouldn't have had an idea of how many are left without this nifty new program we have.
Demons.
And so for Tom, is it find Warblades or bust here? And you can't even get it to all that high of healing amount. But the Blade Dance with Marrow Slicer certainly helps.
Yeah, I guess that's probably slightly better than just going for the Shard Shatter. You take your damage to the face here, and like you were saying a little bit earlier, it's been a long road to get here, but finally the race plan is activated from Tom. He needs some extra help, 100%, but maybe with the Dream Skull, something can happen.
not just straight up dead. Surrender has taken some time to get all the charges through, focusing more on a board-based plan. He is currently 1 off lethal by my count.
Mine as well.
And Tom is showing 7 on the other side, 8 plus hero power. And so Lapidary Second Slice is lethal if Surrender doesn't deal with the board.
That's right. And he does need to be starting to factor those in. He knows that Second Slice is in hand if he's been keeping track, and therefore he is thinking just the second Lapidary is needed to close out the game.
I think it's fine to expend Eviscerate on a minion here because, you know, with 2 charges of the Self-Sharpening Sword, with or without Deadly Poison, it's still representing lethal over 2 turns. And you probably do just commit the Deadly Poison in case Tom goes for some Eldraki play. I'm just so scared about Surrender's self-doubt from last game, but there you have it. That's the play I know him for.
Very smart line. Yep, double stealth as well sets up probably for Greyheart next turn, even if you haven't just won already. And now, 5, 6 damage on board, 11, 13. It's close. It's oh so close for Tom, but he needs a bit of extra help, and that is not it.
And so if you hit double Chaos Strike, maybe Kayn? Does that ever get... I'm trying to find the outs for Tom, but these soul fragments are messing up his discounts.
No!
Oh my gosh! The triple no discount skull.
The disaster. To be fair though, even if it didn't allow him to win the game on the spot, it did heal him for 8 on that turn with all the soul fragments put together, which is a huge deal.
Big. Surrender just doesn't have the lethal right now. We're digging with the Sage.
Oh.
And that's the second Abyss off the top! Last draw! I don't think it was very likely for Surrender to find lethal there. Tom was in a good spot.
Oh man. It was not likely. It was the single Eviscerate, I think, was the only card that did it because he didn't have mana to go for Volpira plus Deadly Poison as well at the end. It had to be the Eviscerate.
But then I'd have to look back if Tom had counter lethal of his own because he also had mana problems because of the no discounts from the skull. I don't know if he had a way to put together 10 damage with the amount of mana he had, but that was extremely close. And I do want to wind it back to that Eviscerate play from Surrender to stay alive was a very good spot. And for Tom, every time we've seen him on